Mr. Archie, would you start us out with your prayer?
Sure. Father God, we want to thank you so much for this time to this time and work you to get this done. Pray, Heavenly Father, thank you this morning this work. We ask this time, this is one that believes that Father, for the lost loved ones, we pray you will comfort them as long as you can, Heavenly Father. These ones that are sick, bring them back to health and skill, Heavenly Father. These ones that are spiritually sick, Heavenly Father, we pray for one in our midst this morning that need you in any way, Heavenly Father, that will come to you before it's too late. We do realize that we sin and fall short of your glory. We ask you to sin this time. Thank you so much for Jesus who died on the cross. We're not losing, have eternal life. I'm faithful. These things they have in his name.
The title for today's lesson is The Need for Forgiveness. And kind of started the lesson, and some circumstances kind of threw it a little off kilter. And when I think of when I started the lesson, I was thinking about Joseph. You know, the whole story from kind of start to finish, you know, his jealous brothers, you know, he was a favorite son. They were jealous, you know, they tricked him, sold him into slavery, and then he ends up in prison. Became a pretty good servant in Potiphar's house, and then the wife tries to seduce him and lies about it. You know, and through all his trials, he rose to second in command to Pharaoh. And you know, the story doesn't really stop there. It goes all the way to where he ends up. I think he's kind of got a good sense of humor, kind of messes with his brothers at first, but he ends up forgiving them in the end. And I don't know that if my brother stuck me in a ditch and sold me into slavery, I think I'd mess with him a lot more rougher than what he did. But
He made him forgive.
it was,
He made him let him go.
yeah. But he did forgive them, and they were pretty scared of what he could have done to them. So I think it's a very good lesson in forgiveness. So I kind of have a few points and, you know, then some scriptures, but to start off the lesson, why do we have the need for forgiveness?
Because we all have sinned. We're all guilty of it. And need to come before God for forgiveness.
Somebody read Colossians 2:13. Yes, sir.
And when you are dead in your transgressions, and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he made you alive together with him, and forgiven us all transgressions.
We need to forgive because we have been forgiven. Kind of the next point, you know, which kind of goes to the next chapter over, Colossians 3:12-13. It kind of reiterates that forgive because we've been forgiven. And as I was reading, you know, I've got a list of scripture we'll go through in a little bit that I kept thinking about Peter asking how many times we forgive. And, you know, he says, I think it was 7 times, and Jesus tells him 7 times 70. There ain't nobody in the world that's going to carry a tally book himself with each individual sin up to 490 times. I mean, I'm not going to waste my time doing that. But, you know, sometimes it is harder to forgive things than others. I think that's part of our mortality, you know, it's, I can forgive somebody if they cut me off the traffic, when, you know, somebody does something for my kid or something, I'm a whole lot less forgiving on the scenario.
Verse 13, chapter 3, mentions bearing one another and forgiving each other. The next verse says, beyond all these things, love love, which is a perfect bond of unity. I've got scribbled out there, 1 Corinthians 13. The love chapter.
Yes, sir.
Let's keep it on.
Sometimes it's kind of hard to love somebody and forgive them. All right, so I'll read Luke 7:47.
Do you think we can act, if we have actually forgiven if we can't forget?
No, I do not.
If you know, you got that thought in mind all the time, I'll bet you agree. You forget.
No, when we were kids and we get in trouble for something, you're supposed to apologize to your brother and forgive him. It was more like, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right.
I'm doing it so I'm not in any more trouble versus, I'm really not sorry for what I had done or what I was about to do. But that was the, you know, and I guess, you know, sometimes as you grow older, you figure, you know, you do learn how to forgive a little bit better, but no, I think you actually have to wholeheartedly forgive them and love them to be able to do it correctly.
My problem is I can't forget myself the things I have done. That I know the good Lord has forgiven me and forgotten about it. And I know I've got forgiveness, but I still can't forget it. I guess that's human nature, huh?
I think forgiveness is more for us, because sometimes if someone hurts you and they continue to hurt you, if you forget it, then they will hurt you again. So you need to be willing to forgive and forgive in that way. But I don't know that you have to forget it
No, I don't think.
to forgive. You can be willing to accept their apology or whatever, but a lot of times you don't ever get that. Even if you have to forgive, but that's for us, so we don't have that animosity and hate and such like that. We have to love them and wish better for them, don't wish them harm or anything like that, to forgive. So I don't think God expects us to forget every little thing.
I don't think so. I was just thinking, you know, if somebody slaps me on the side of the face, it's gonna make me mad, and I can probably forgive them. But if somebody does it a second time, I'm not gonna forget again. And so I'm gonna make sure I'm staying away from them. So I don't think I can forgive them, but it doesn't mean I have to keep putting my cheek right there where they can slap me every time they see me.
Marshall, the kind of forgetting that I think we're talking about here is, we no longer let it run our lives. And we put it so far behind us, in later years or whatever, if it crosses our mind, it may not even faze us. But I'm sure we still remember it wouldn't cross our mind. But it no longer phases us if we've forgiven them. We don't get mad at them again, or we don't, we've already done whatever we had to do to make it right for us. But totally forgetting, everything's ever been said to you or you've ever done is up here somewhere. Okay, it doesn't all surface all of the time. Some never surfaces again, but some things will resurface from time to time. And I think the important thing in forgetting is how do we handle that when it does resurface?
Think so.
I have an example that night you do too, where you're talking, both my brothers were older than me. And they beat me up quite regularly. And I told my mom later in life that about some of those, she said, well, you should have told me. And I said, well, I was smart enough, even though I was little, to understand that if I told them and they got spankings, that I'd get another beating. So I was smart enough to take that one and go on. And I always promised myself when I got big enough and strong enough that I was gonna whoop them both. But when that finally happened, it didn't matter to me anymore, so. I think that's kind of the forgetting part too sometimes.
Mark, I had an older sister who did the same thing to me.
She still does.
I got old enough to be rough, she spoke be nice to me.
I think about, Todd used to tell us, Jessica used to pick on poor Nick mercilessly. And then one day Nick had finally got enough and he picked her up, carried her down to the edge of the dock and hurled her up in Lake Whitewater. So after that, Jessica didn't pick on Nick anymore. Sometimes you get to a balance to what, you know. But I do think that, to forgiveness you have to put out, you might not forget, I call it improvising, you gotta kind of adapt to your scenario, but if you're truly gonna forgive somebody, you have to love them and kind of just, might not forget it, but put it in the back of your mind.
If you don't, you become bitter.
Mhm.
And that's, I think that's what forgiveness is about, so that you don't become. If you don't forgive them and you dwell on it, then what does that leave you?
I don't remember the name of the movie we watched, in school. It was kind of what I would have deemed as a chick flick, and it wasn't a big action war movie. I wasn't paying attention usually anyway, but the gist of the story was this, kid wanted to go to the fair, and his parents didn't take him, wouldn't take him something, and he grew up, basically mad at the world to where, they figured that, the punchline was, or the storyline was, his resentment and hate of them not taking him when he wanted to go caused him all kinds of problems later in life. He ends up getting cancer. Well, he basically kept it to himself and didn't say anything. And then the last part of the movie is that his family's pushing him. They bought this fair and put it in their backyard so he could go to that fair. But he was dying at that point from cancer because he held it off and it just grew inside him. And like I said, it wasn't a movie I was really interested in, so that's about the only couple parts I understood. But that kind of stuck with me. If you hold hate and resentment to somebody for so long, it's going to fester and grow and cause you problems more than it's going to ever cause them. You know?
Anything we have wrong with us, if we're holding some kind of resentment that much, it's going to affect whatever the disease, whatever is wrong with it. It's going to be worse. I don't care what it is. You know, you go to the doctor and say, well, it's stress. Well, yeah, it's stress. I'm under stress sometimes. We're living in this world. We're under stress sometimes. But we still got to do something about the symptoms, you know. And so anything that you said that's done to you any time in your life might cause you stress if you don't learn to forgive. And it may cause you to be sicker than you have to be sometimes. It's all connected.
Let's look at Luke 5:17 through 26. If somebody doesn't mind reading that. Luke 5:17 through 26.
Now it happened on a certain day, as he was teaching, that there were Pharisees and teachers of the law sitting by, who had come out of every town of Galilee, Judea, and Jerusalem. And the power of the Lord was present to heal them. And behold, men brought a bed on a man who was paralyzed, whom they sought to bring in and lay before him. And when they could not find how they might bring him in because of the crowd, they went up on the housetop and let him down with his bed through the tiling into the midst before Jesus. When he saw their faith, he said to them, "Man, your sins are forgiven you." And the scribes and the Pharisees began to reason, saying, "Who is this who speaks blasphemies? Who can forgive sins but God alone?" But when Jesus perceived their thoughts, he answered and said to them, "Why are you reasoning in your hearts? Which is easier to say, 'Your sins are forgiven you,' or to say, 'Rise up and walk'? That you may know that the Son of Man has power on earth to forgive sins." He said to the man who was paralyzed, I say to you, arise, take up your bed, and go to your house. Immediately he rose up before them, took up what he had been lying on, and departed to his own house, glorifying God. And they were all amazed, and they glorified God and were filled with fear, saying, we have seen strange things today.
Well, it says, it says filled with awe. And, forgiveness precedes healing. You can't stay any bitter or not believe or whatever it is and begin to heal. You have to have that forgiveness to for healing. This week's been a pretty tough week, and to cope with it after, everywhere I go, I see my little brother, and it's been hard, but I know I love him. We wasn't at odds really for anything. I know he came back to church, so he's okay now. I mean, now did we have our brotherly quarrels in life? Oh yeah, we had some good ones, but it never meant that I don't honestly think that he ever knew or thought that I didn't love him. So as we got older, when we did have a quarrel or something, we would forgive. It might take us 6 months before you got around to saying, I'm sorry, but it did happen. So that's how I dealt with some of that. But yeah, you do have to forgive, and not just grit your teeth because your mom wants you to kind of forgive us. So last real point for this would be Leviticus 19:18. And I'm not with 19:18 says, you shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against the sons of your own people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. So tell us there that we have to forgive and not to seek revenge or bear a grudge against your brother. So, any thoughts? Anything?
I think one of the problems sometimes we have is we use the word like and love interchangeably, and they're not the same. You don't have to like somebody to love them when Christian love. That is absolutely the biggest. Now there are, and if you're going to marry somebody you don't like but you think they're dumb, I say don't do it. Because if you like somebody and don't love them, you may grow. It may be easy for you to love them, to learn to love them real fast. But if you just love them and don't like them, there's the likelihood of your learning. There's more likelihood of the love changing than the like. So what we're supposed to do is not wish each other anything bad. We're supposed to forgive them. We're supposed to help them if they need help. We're supposed to treat them like we treated the other human beings. Treat them like Jesus Christ would treat them. But you don't have to necessarily like that person. As I think of the word like.
Marshall, I think sometimes it is harder in families than it is with a stranger because, you think, well, they know my situation, they know my life, but yet they went ahead and did this when a stranger, may not know anything about you. But I think sometimes it is harder in families. I know it is in church families sometimes because I've seen that. So.
Well, the thing is,
Sometimes you have more ammo the closer you are to them.
Yes.
I don't know why.
the thing of it, sometimes we forget in these situations, we don't get to pick our families. And there's going to be personality conflicts among family members, and that's just, and as you mature, you need to learn how to realize, okay, I have a personal older brother, in order for us to be at least cordial and be sisterly or brotherly or whatever to that person. Okay, if it means that, like one thing I had to do with my mother, my therapist friend said, you feel like you have to go see her because she's your mother, but don't ever go to your mother's house without an escape plan. And somebody said, well, let's go to others, and we're going in my car, so you can do any car you want to, I'm going in mine. Because there's probably gonna something happen that I had to leave, or it was gonna be, I don't know what would. So, we need to learn as we grow and we realize, hey, this is a personality conflict. And we just need, or this is a subject that we can't talk about. And just make some concession that you can handle to still let it work. We have to do that for our church family. We don't necessarily get to pick who's in our church family. Some of us try, but you can't do it. But they're still our family, and we still have to learn how to handle differences and so forth with those people. And still treat them as our Christian brothers and sisters. That's not always easy.
Marshall, what was that verse in Leviticus?
Chapter 19, verse 18.
9, okay, 9.
Well, I think sometimes it's easier to forgive. I could probably forgive Gary a whole lot faster than I might could for Mr. Archie. I've known Gary longer. He was there when I was born. I'm closer to, Gary. But, sometimes certain, things, how long you've known somebody, how close you are to them, will definitely help. I'm just kidding, Archie. I forgive you too. Let's talk about how to forgive. I was just an example of me and my brothers, we were being told to forgive, but, sometimes you have to realize that, and admit that you are part of the conflict too. It wasn't all on them. And that's for anybody. I know sometimes being we argue or something, or have a very long discussion. Sometimes, you kind of point the fingers one way or the other, and really it's still both of you. And you gotta, I guess sometimes I probably put more of the blame on her, because that's the way I see it, but they see it the exact opposite way, and maybe I'm more on me. And then, the next thing, sometimes I think that we forget to, to pray. We need to ask Jesus, he's the ultimate forgiver, to empower us, to help us, to guide us through, forgiving. And like I said before, it doesn't mean that you have to forget. With that.
Sometimes we have to remember that the person who hurt us and did something that we didn't like loves us. And we have to remember that they didn't probably intend to hurt you, and it comes into a argument or a clash that really didn't have to be, because they love you. It's like, like your husband or your wife. If you know they love you, and your family and your parents, and you know they love you, then you shouldn't get your feelings hurt so easily that you have to lash back. That's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But we should remember that. We shouldn't be carrying a chip on our shoulder.
Very true. Some people are more easily offended than others, so it's easier to offend them.
And we have to be aware of that.
Mhm.
Sometimes we do kind of have to walk on eggshells to keep from having a disagreement that gets out of hand.
Hey, Marshall. Beverly just said something that made me think about something. I'm watching a football game or something. They say, well, what, he really plays with a chip on his shoulder, because he thought he should have been drafted higher or whatever. But in all actuality, that's really not the way you should be. You should just do it, you know, for the love of the game or whatever. And that just seems to be pervasive in our society today. That's a good thing if you're, you know, if you're playing or doing whatever with a chip on your shoulder. They almost use that in a positive way, and it's not.
I thought that's a good point.
Sometimes we just wait for somebody to say something wrong, to be able to attack them. And we don't need to do that.
Sure. That's very true. I try to stay away from them kind of people completely.
Well, yeah, but
I can forgive that they can be grumpy,
we
you
can't
know.
always
Yeah.
do that.
It's not- Sometimes you can't get away from, you know, like I said, we can't pick our families, and sometimes there's no escape if you're a little child, there's no way to get away from it. Because, really, unless somebody reports you to child abuse and they come and get you, or something like that, which we don't want, you know, that's an extreme example, but that's about the only way a child can get away, arrows dying. And so, it's not always easy out of every situation, but there are ways to avoid. And you know, I always say I have a list of non-answers that I use sometimes when they're appropriate. If somebody asks me something and I don't particularly want to answer it for whatever reason, or I think it's something that doesn't need to be, time and effort doesn't need to be used, I may say something like, well, that's interesting. And then we'll walk away. And it may not be interesting to me really, but it may be to that person, so it's just interesting. And somebody told me one time that if I saw something I thought I just had to make a comment about, couldn't think of anything to say, I'd say that's interesting. Well, you know, it works.
I had an old boss that he would just say, "Have a nice day." That's all he'd say. That was his, "I'm out of here, I'm done with this," whatever. That was his, so she said that. Kind of next point on that is decide that you don't want to keep on letting that person hurt you by holding the grudge. Sometimes I think we think too much on us, holding the grudge, and sometimes, you know, you hold a grudge against me, I'm not letting it stop me. I tell Hobie or whoever, I sleep just fine now. I'm not going to bed mad at somebody, I'm not going to bed still upset at somebody, and I sleep just fine. However you want to handle yours, you mad at me, that's on you. But, you know, I haven't done anything to where it inhibits my sleep, and I sleep just fine. She even has to poke me sometimes, she says I'm snoring so loud, so I sleep just fine. So that's kind of, you know, somebody's, if you're mad at me or you have something you need to say, you better tell me, because I'm not gonna notice, and I'm perfectly at peace with how I handle things. I've had to, you know, especially at work, I had a poor helper, he didn't really know what was going on, and we were kind of in a bind, and I was kind of yelling at him, but he should have known a little bit more than what we were doing, to where when we were in that bind, I'm getting soaking wet, and you're just kind of lollygagging there, waiting for me to give you instruction, and so I kind of yelled, and after we got it kind of fixed, and it wasn't so bad, I might not should have yelled at you, I'm kind of sorry. He's like, oh, I get it, but he was 5 foot away telling me that. So, it's kind of funny, but I mean, sometimes you gotta see to be aware of the situation on something, but easily forgiven. So, why do you think it's difficult to forgive those who hurt you specifically?
Well, sometimes we just burn babies on our sleeves too much. And sometimes this is a priority thing. Is this really worth the time and the effort? Is there something else I need to be doing instead of worrying about this? You know, You know, in the overall scheme of things, did it cause a famine or did anybody die? No, well, okay, that's gone.
Because we like to be right.
If you let things like that bother you and it gets worse and festers, then you've long lost having your eyes on Jesus and what he's taught.
I looked at, I felt, when I was doing this, I was answering this question. Sometimes I think, it shows weakness. So you don't really want to forgive somebody because it shows like you might have been wrong or you're weaker or something like that. And that's not necessarily the case. Then I kind of, thinking about this, I kind of was looking at another preacher, what he was saying about forgiveness. And a lot of his points were fear. A lot of it has to do with fear. You can't forgive somebody because forgiving them, you're giving them the power back. Where they, I guess, they think they can do it again or something like that. Or losing the image of superiority. We like to think of ourselves as like white knights and we're the good guy and they're the bad guy. A lot of times, disagreements or that cause grudges are minuscule. They don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. And really, you're probably both right. I don't know. Either I'm colorblind or me and my wife cannot tell the different shades of color. She'll ask me a color and I'll tell her that's red or whatever color it is, and she'll get into a very specific color or it ain't that color or whatever else. I only know about 6 or 7 colors apparently, so that's the shade I know. And some people are so focused on ask me that exact shade and it's not. Or for whatever the thing is. I could not tell you what color my shirt is.
I read a thing one time about Alaska. People in Alaska know about 10 different kinds of snow. We know snow. It either is or it's not, but they know different kinds. Now, John knows 2 different kinds, dry and wet snow. But to me, it's snow. But in Alaska, they know different kinds, so they would argue with you about the difference. And it's the same thing with the color. People in Africa only see like the 3 main colors in black and white. That's about all they see. And then there's people who are designers that see every color in the shade. It's just the difference, probably in the way you were educated, but also in the way that you want to know.
Well, I think, since you were saying that, I think a lot of times, I like history, I like war movies, I like the Cowboys, certain things. My wife could care less about some of that stuff, but something that I deem very important, I'm like really excited to tell her or whatever. She's kind of, whatever. Now, she sees a good recipe and she's showing me, I'm kind of, either cook it or don't show it to me, but I don't even see all that stuff. So, sometimes it's important just because, that recipe might have been really important to her, or a new outfit or something. That's something that I need to kind of show that. And sometimes you can take that indecisiveness or the and, it could, bother somebody a lot more. So she's got better, she'll watch a little bit of Cowboys, but not.
In those situations, so here's the way you work it. Let me give a personal example. I was really into genealogy one time, and David did wood carving. I liked his work, he did good work, but it was pretty, and I was confident on it. But I didn't hear anything about carving a piece of wood. He didn't hear anything about finding out who his great-great-great-granddaddy was. I wanted to know. Well, we were going somewhere in Arkansas, and I said, now, there's 2 towns I want to stop in, because I want to go to the courthouse and see if they have any records. And then go to the cemetery there. One of them was Rising, Arkansas, from that cemetery. And, okay, well, he wasn't interested in going to that courthouse and going through records and talking to people when they'd been, Rising, Arkansas was a wide place in the road. It is the county seat. Well, he wasn't interested in that. So he took his carving knife and his wood block, and they had a beautiful lawn around that big courthouse. Oak and trees and benches around it. The whole time I stayed in that courthouse, he sat out there and did wood carving. So you can, there's things like that that sometimes you can learn to work out where both of you will get some pleasure out of whatever is going on at the moment.
It's a compromise right there. Then you have, fear of losing hope for a better relationship, and, sometimes it could be, this particular preacher was talking about, that I kind of stole this point from, was talking about, like a child addicted to drugs or something like that. Sometimes at a certain point, you just, I call it being my pilot, you just kind of wash your hands clean of it, but it's, that might be as good as they're ever gonna be. They're never gonna change, so you just have to kind of make a certain peace with them, that they're not gonna change. You can still love them and care about them, but just keep your distance from them and not let what they're doing bother you or hold you back from that stuff.
That's not very forgiving.
Or you can forgive them from it and stay away from them, is what he was saying.
That if the person doesn't want forgiveness, can you force it on?
Well,
God doesn't do that. So I don't think we can. I think we can get to the point that we don't let it bother us. We don't hold that as a part of contention all the time. But they haven't rectified the situation, so you can't have a rectified situation. So
I guess you said it better than what I could.
it's a hard situation. I mean, I know that there's some people that just, you will never be able to get along with completely because they don't want to. They just don't want to. And there's no compromise. There's no fixing it. So you just got to go, do all you can to keep the peace and move on.
what is the scripture says, as far as it depends on you, be it
Yeah.
peace by all means.
Exactly.
Sometimes you have to, it seems like it's a firm peace.
Yes.
To be at peace with some people.
The thing I thought about with that is in Luke 23:34, it says, but Jesus was saying, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. God did not forgive them right then. Now, some of these people actually were there on Pentecost and were forgiven because they obeyed the gospel, they believed in Jesus, they did what they needed to do to be forgiven. But at this moment, they were not forgiven. God did not forgive them. But Jesus had the mind that he wanted them to be forgiven. And that, I think, is kind of what you're talking about. We would like to have a relationship restored and forgiveness happen. But Jesus asked for forgiveness for these people, and it didn't happen then. It did happen later. So we need to include those people in our prayers.
The door is always open on our end.
Yeah.
And they're welcome to come when they're ready. We haven't closed the door to reconciliation.
But we can pray for them that they will change their mind
Right.
and basically change their mind and come back to God. But they weren't forgiven. And if Jesus can ask it in there, he can have that attitude, and God still won't forgive them until they obey. You're right. We can't do something that God can't do.
If we close the door, then God closed the door on us.
Right. So it's our attitude.
Next, it is hard when you know that
somebody doesn't want to be reconciled. It's hard, because you wonder, what's wrong with me that you don't, that you don't want that, you know? What have I done? What more can I do to make it to where you want that? That's tough.
We don't know, I'm sorry, we don't know at what stage something is happening in their life that their mind goes back and picks up all of these positive thoughts, all of these caring thoughts that other people have for them. And it comes back into their mind, and they start replaying this over and over and over. And they may come to the realization that, you know, maybe my life is headed in the wrong direction. And it may not be that instantaneous thing at that point, or when someone else tries to say, we really would like to pray for you and study with you. Their mind's set against it, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to change. It's just like that child who's brought up in the church and in Christ, that he will not depart from it. Well, that doesn't say that he's going to be that Christian child with those Christian values all of their life. Somewhere along the way, when a maturity level sets in, they change from what they've learned to what they want to do and be part of. And I think it's the same way with us when we approach other people and say, we do continually pray for you. We know that life is hard and there's decisions in your life that you're trying to make. And they make those decisions, that doesn't mean that they don't come to a realization later on that God is there and he's there for a purpose.
I think of people like Felix, you know, who had every opportunity to change and didn't. He was fearful to change, and we don't know that he ever had another opportunity. Time to reconcile is when the emotion is like along with the opportunity.
Again.
I have a question. I've been seeing a lot of it on TV and thinking about it. Where does bullying, like, goes on in school,